Is your child unfocused, has a hard time paying attention? Well, imagine if there was a way for them to be focused without medication. Hi, I'm Dr. Roseann, and today we're diving into one of my all time favorite topics neurofeedback. It's a form of brain retraining that naturally helps the brain process quicker, be calmer, and pay attention. And we're going to talk about how neurofeedback helps kids do better in school and also what are the long term benefits, right? So let's dive in. So let's talk about some of the common challenges that kids and individuals with ADHD, how do they struggle? Well, how does it affect them in school, whether they're in elementary school, preschool, college, they're in graduate school? So some of the common challenges that they have, of course, is just with focus and attention, right? So having to pay attention when it's not stimulating is the kryptonite for somebody with ADHD because their brain is wired to see exciting things. And when their brain is getting stimulation on their preferred areas of interest, wow, they actually can hyper focus like it's nobody's business. And that's why so many entrepreneurs and successful people actually have ADHD because the house could be burning down and they're doing their thing, whatever it is. Hopefully, it's something that, they can make a vocation out of, right? And vocation is something that you love, not just a job, but like really just a passion for something you want to spend your whole life. And they can really hyper focus. So when it comes to not being able to pay attention in school or at home, it means you're often not hearing everything, you're missing the first parts of things, you're missing little cues, right? Whether that affects you in the social realm academically or it's affecting what you're reading, they're missing things, right? The other area that it always affects individuals with ADHD is executive functioning. And go back and listen to the whole series on executive functioning. But really, what is executive functioning? So everyone always thinks it's the same as attention. It's not. So attention is the brain's ability to alert when it's supposed to. Executive functioning is for it to future think, to plan, to say, this is what I'm doing because in 3 days I'm gonna have a test, or, I'm gonna eat healthy so I don't continue to gain weight or to lose weight. You're working today for a future action. You have to plan, and it requires a lot of coordination. It can affect organization, it can affect writing. It's a layered, um part of functions, and there are basic parts of executive functionings and advanced skills. And the great part is that even though that it's the job manager in the brain, these are a set of skills that can be learned. But typically those with ADHD have poor executive functioning skills unless somebody at home and in school has been teaching with the future in mind and always really getting kids to visualize and activate those parts of the brain. Um, One of the biggest problems that somebody with ADHD has is actually starting and completing tasks. Because, there's lots of, being an ADD adult is sort of like a cool thing now. And there's actually lots of really fun videos about it. But, it's not fun in the real world. And when a kid has a hard time getting started or persisting through and completing tasks, it can be very frustrating for them and their parents, and it often can affect particularly reading comprehension and writing. Writing seems to be one of the hardest tasks because it incorporates so many facets of executive functioning. It requires a lot of persistence. It requires you to actually slow down. ADD brains are really fast and take all the information, slow it down, and then write it, put it in writing. And that's hard, you know? So with these things in mind, right, and these common challenges, and there's other challenges. Kids with ADHD may be impulsive and it may affect them socially. And, there are a lot of different components. But I would say these are probably the core things that I hear all the time. So what is neurofeedback? How does it work? How does it help kids? And again, I also have like a whole website about it. You can go to drroseann.com. If you want to get on our email list and you actually want to find the right solution for yourself, you can go to drroseann.com/help. It's going to match you to the right solution. But more importantly, you're going to get our really cool emails and you're going to get alerts for our show and you're going to get information, right? I do spend a lot of time writing, actually. I love to write. So, what is neurofeedback? Really simply, it's been around since the late 1960s. It's a technology that actually reinforces the brain for producing a healthy combination of brain waves. You're hooked up to a computer, nothing comes through the wires, and the brain, every time it produces a right combination, I'm going to get into that, gets stimulation, and that stimulation is a movie playing. And what we do is EEG neurofeedback. We work with people all over the United States, sometimes in the world, depending on where you are, and if your Hertz, your power grid matches up with the U.S. power grid, I can work with you. We mail people equipment. Most people fly out one time, and I work with a small amount of people every month. So what happens is you're getting a visual and auditory reinforcement. We're using movies, YouTube, different types of things to actually reinforce the brain. And the technology uses those methods to tell the brain this is the right combination of brain waves, keep doing it. So, how does this whole thing start? What happens? So, what I do is very different in than most practitioners, right? So I've done over 10,000 brain maps. When you're coming to me, I'm just not a neurofeedback provider. You're really coming to me for an entire program that is going to incorporate, dietary changes, supplements, parenting components. It's really all encompassing. So I am not your standard, come in, do a session, walk out the door. This is really so that you're really looking to say, I want things to be really different. But neurofeedback in general, some of us, including myself, we do what's called QEG Brain Map. And I love a QEG Brain Map. You're putting a cap on, you're collecting data. It's 30 minutes tops. Sometimes it could be 20 minutes or less, depending on how regulated somebody is in the seat. Don't worry about it. We're used to working with kids. And it's analyzing that. We're putting you in a database. We're looking at, patterns, right? And from those patterns, because I've done over 10,000 of these, not many people interpret their own brain maps, and that's okay. They send them out to be reviewed, but you really want to make sure you're going to somebody who's board certified like myself, by BCIA. And that's the only certifying board, international board. And from there, I'm able to say, hey, this part of the brain works. This part of the brain doesn't work. Right. And I mean that it's not working optimally. Right. So you can see what's happening over the structures, right? So what's happening in the frontal lobes for somebody with ADHD? Maybe when you look there, because 50% of the time when somebody comes to me with ADD, they don't have ADD. Maybe when you look there, it's actually a learning disability. Somebody came in this week and they were like, my kid's really ADD. And everybody was dyslexic in the family. And I was like, hmm, sounds like he's dyslexic. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, he is a little." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. That's the primary problem here. And yeah, there's some ADD components in here, but it's really pretty secondary. This is primary dyslexia." And they were like, "Wow." It was like kind of surprising because he was the least dyslexic one in the family, So it was great because now we could target the intervention. So when I look at the brain, I can see the structures, I can see the brain communication. And from there, I make protocols. And what am I trying to do in these protocols is I'm looking at where does that brain need to regulate, right? Is it understimulated? Is it overstimulated? How can I reinforce that part of the brain to change itself? And it does it so easily and so beautiful from within 2 to 3 seconds of the first time you're hooked up. Your brain will actually start producing the exact combination of healthy brainwaves. I mean, it kind of blows people's mind, and it should, right? So your brain gets this reinforcement, and it's not a one or done because that we'd all be happy, and you'd go get gas and there'd be a little neurofeedback station. You get your one, and you'd be great, and everybody would be a lovely world, right? But that's not the way it works. So you're coming 2 to 3 times a week for my people that are remote. Actually, almost all my people are remote, 95%. You're doing neurofeedback at home 2 to 3 times a week, just like working out. You have to build the muscle. Super pleasant. Sessions are about a half an hour. And in our program, we do about 40 sessions. Some people do slightly less, not so often. Some people do more, sometimes, depending on what's going on. And that's all part of the process. A highly skilled practitioner, somebody who really has experience in your area. Again, the majority of my cases, you're listening to me. They're mostly pretty complex cases. Every once in a while, I get somebody with a little anxiety. I got somebody yesterday, and that's because mama's super holistic, and only wanted to go to somebody who had advanced skills in the integrative methods, because she's an integrative practitioner herself. So she really wanted to go to a high level expert, and that's what she wanted. And she had a neurofeedback provider right down the road, and wanted something different. And that's okay, right? You should go to practitioners that are aligned with you and your family values, and also you can learn from and help you. So neurofeedback, 2 to 3 sessions a week, you're reinforcing the brain for producing a healthy combination. What happens, right? So what do we see in research, particularly with ADHD kids? And there are um, thousands of research studies around neurofeedback. I mean, there's gotta be thousands just with ADHD, 3,000 plus peer reviewed. And, it's safe, it's efficacious, and the research says that it's lasting over time. So what do we see in particular for ADHD and kids with neurodivergence, right? So the research is deep, right? But top takeaways, you can see changes in cognitive functioning, and of course, attention. Those are some of the things that we see. We see better impulse control, and lessing of hyperactive behaviors. They love to measure ADHD kids because their behaviors, particularly for the impulsive hyperactive child, are much more observable. They see global changes in behavior. They see differences in memory and processing speed. I think that's one of the coolest things. I know that's what I experienced when I did neurofeedback, was just a dramatic improvement in processing speed. Like how quickly I could do something, um, for myself almost freaked me out. And if you've ever heard me talk about this, like I freak people out. I mean, obviously I'm not a dumb person, but it just elevated my processing to sort of like this lightning speed kind of way, not in the way that it was more that you could take a lot of information and you knew what was salient right away. Like you could just go right through it, sort of like being at a garbage dump and being like, that's the thing I threw out right there, and you could just get information much quicker. And so when you're cleaning up somebody who really is a wired differently brain, and you're helping them to get that communication working better, which is where I focus mostly on as a practitioner, because all my peeps know I say it's your biggest bang for your buck when you're doing it in alignment, you're balancing the wheels instead of just working on one. You can get global changes, and that's why there's so many different positive changes. So some of the other changes that they see is improvement in academics, and obviously we're looking a lot at reading, math, reading comprehension. So there can be changes. Some of the long-term benefits that we have to think about in any intervention, but particularly with neurofeedback, right, is that you're getting a self regulated nervous system. So we get our kids to move from dysregulation, whether that's under or overstimulation, to regulation, which is what we want. And when that happens, right, we get social emotional benefits, that they're less reactive, better self regulation in terms of emotional control. I know when people work with me, I always say, I want you to look for changes in intensity, frequency, and duration, basically of every symptom. But when it comes to emotional explosions, overreactions, sensory reactions, meltdowns, all these things that, you can't parent around that. You have to stop and support your kid. When that starts decreasing, right, in that intensity, frequency, and duration, everything just improves and your child feels differently about themselves. And when your kid is more attentive, less reactive, they have better peer relationships, they have better communication with others, including peers. And of course, why I do all the work that I do is that kids have better self esteem and confidence. And, you can have everything in the world. And I hear this from adults. So know this, if you don't have self-esteem and self-confidence, you got nothing because you won't have that inner feeling, that knowing, that love of yourself to do the things that you're capable of. So I could talk about neurofeedback all day. I love it. It's what I do. And it's part of a really, our brain behavior reset program. I didn't even say the name of it. If you're interested in working with us one on one, we take a handful of people. And as I always say, if you identify as rude or disrespectful, don't call me. And I don't care what people's problem is. We love complex problems. That's my jam. I believe everybody can get better. The degree is unique to each person and each brain and each family ecosystem. But you can go to drroseann.com/help and take that solution matcher, and it's going to guide you in the right way. So if you have questions about neurofeedback and you're on my list, just reply back, ask away. We have lots of videos, but I hope I enlightened you about neurofeedback and some of the positive things. And it's really important that you find a provider who is really an expert in your area and that you're actually doing a healthy amount of sessions. If you're doing less than 20 sessions, you are wasting your time. But it's a wonderful, evidence based, non medication approach. And I hope you consider it for your ADHD child, your neurodivergent child, your dysregulated kid, whatever they got. It's a wonderful treatment.